Thank you so much for the invitation of I thank the organizers of International Symposium on Higher Learning Education to invite me to speak on this topic on how to write the discussion, implication, and conclusion effectively. Um, so I'm sure that since morning and the day before, you have been learning about various areas regarding to research, like how to find research gaps and how to write hypotheses and research results. So now we have come to the end of any research paper or research thesis, which is the discussion, implications, and conclusion part. I will be taking all these three topics separately because they all have their own importance. And before starting with this topic, I would like to start with the discussion part, which is the most important. This heading, which comes after the results or findings are shown. So when you are ready to write your discussion, you have already introduced your purpose of your study, your methodology, your review of literature, your results are already out there. So now the next part is discussion. So what is a discussion part and what it includes? Let's start with that. A discussion part basically highlights the implications of your study. That is why often with discussion, implications of the study is also given. Sometimes people uh, write down in the research paper discussions and research implications. So sometimes they go together. Sometimes it is given as a separate heading, discussions, and then followed by the research implications. So it depends on the requirement of the journal. It depends on the author, how he or she wants to show uh, the discussion in the research paper. So preferably it is advised that you show your implications along with the discussion part. So highlighting the implications while not overstating the findings can be a challenge research paper. And you should try not to overstate your findings in the discussion part. Regardless of what journal you're submitting to, discussion section always serve as the same purpose. Means it basically concludes what your study results actually mean. In discussion, you are showing what is the meaning of your results. So when you are showing your results in a paper through charts, diagrams, you are showing images, not always the reader can be able to understand that. So you can simplify the results of your study in the discussion part, because sometimes we use technical words and figures and images or tables in your results. So to understand the meaning of your results, we write discussion, and from discussion we find out the implications of your study. That is why I said the discussion and research implications go hand to hand. But I will talk about research implications later also. So let's move on with the discussion part further. A discussion section contains the results and outcomes of a study. An effective discussion informs readers that what they can learn or what they have learned from the results of your study. For example, you did a experiment, or let's say you did some study or did a survey, and you got the numbers with you. But what is the meaning of these numbers? You have to interpret that or write the meaning of all the results in the discussion part. That is the aim of the discussion. A successful discussion section puts your findings in the context, and it should always include few things. So one of them is the result of the research. And again, I repeat that the discussion should include first the results of your research, a discussion of the related research, and a comparison between your result and initial hypothesis. So first, you need to show what is the result of your study. Then you can discuss the results of other studies which are linked to your study. Maybe you can draw a comparison between them also, that what you found out and what they have said so far in their study. And you can also compare your hypothesis with your result. I'm sure in the previous sessions you have discussed about, or you have learned about what is a hypothesis. So you can also compare that what was your hypothesis which you made in the beginning of the study, and what is your result saying? What is the comparison between these two? So if the results are not matching with the hypothesis, you can just say that your hypothesis is void or cannot be accepted. So there is, in the discussion session, you can also compare your hypothesis with your results. So these three things must be there in the discussion part. Then moving on, you might be thinking that what is a structure of a discussion? How should we start a discussion? What should be in the first paragraph, second paragraph? So I will again now tell you that what is the structure of a paragraph, this discussion. But of course, I repeat that there is no fixed structure. Structures change as per requirement of journal. It can it's up to the author also, however he or she is writing. But yes, you can follow a pattern. You cannot fit everything in one paragraph, so it is advisable that you use multiple paragraphs for the discussion also. So if possible, you can use 2 or 3 paragraphs for the discussion. Now I'll show you in the next slide what are the different paragraphs you can use in your discussion. So the first paragraph is the introductory paragraph. Provide the essential interpretation based on key findings. Your first thing which you should do is write down the interpretation of your findings. What is the meaning of your result or findings? Include a main piece of supporting evidence. You can also add or show supporting evidence. That what is there should be some supporting evidence which supports your findings. Means you found out what through what. So give evidence, give support for your findings. So the initial should be focused on your findings, the initial paragraph of your discussion, because you want the reader to know or the reviewer to know what do you mean by these results. Because as I said, not always you cannot understand the findings or results. Not everyone can do that because sometimes it is technical in nature. Then second paragraph, you can compare and contrast to previous studies. So once you're done with the findings, you can move on to the previous studies. Like you can compare like what you found out in your study and what the other authors or studies have given in their results. You can have a comparison. Maybe you are showing something different in your results. Maybe your results are common or similar to the previous studies. So whatever the case is, you can always highlight important studies and show a contrast between them. Now, one more thing which people show in the discussion, again, it completely depends on the writer. Is there research limitations, right? Now, you might think that why should we show our limitations of our research here? But uh, it's not a problem if you showcase that we all face some issues in our research. Sometimes we don't have much time. Sometimes we not have the right funds for our study. So it is okay to showcase that what are the things which maybe affected your study or limited your study. So you can show the strength and limitation of the study also. Again, some people show research limitations as a separate heading also, right? After discussion, you can write down discussion and research implications, then the research limitations, and then maybe you can go to conclusion. So again, depending on the journal's requirement, depending on you, you can change it, but you can also show the limitation in the discussion part as well. So show that why your study is different, what is the strength, and why, what were the limitations. Then discuss any unexpected findings. In the second paragraph, you can also show something which you were not trying to find out, but you found out anyway. Something new you figured out. If it is there, then how you conclude the discussion part in the beginning. And what was the purpose of your study? What were you trying to find out? And what were the limitations of your study? So Okay, on the basis of discussion, in discussion, you will write down that these were the questions which you had in your mind when you were starting the study. Now, on the basis of your results, this is the answer to these questions. So, if anyone reads your study or research paper, if he only reads discussion and conclusion, he can still understand what you were trying to do. Sometimes people do not have much time to go through the whole study. They can move on to the discussion conclusion part as well. Let's say a reviewer or a reader. So you should always end the discussion part with what was your objective and how you achieved that objective in the discussion part. Okay. So three paragraphs can be used for discussion. First is about what is the meaning of your results. Second, you compare it to other studies, and you can also highlight your limitations and strength. And last, you try to show the how you found the answer to your questions. And yes, one more important thing, that what is the potential for future research? What else can be done in the future? Again, this part sometimes is also given as a separate heading in some papers as the potential for future research or future research. So again, you can merge this section also with discussion. That makes it simpler to for the reader to understand also, right? So uh, this is about the discussion. Now coming to the summary of discussion part. A discussion chapter is where you delve into the meaning and importance of your results. What is the meaning of your results? You should focus on explaining what you found and how it is linked with your research, review of literature and your questions, how it answers your questions. And you should also show how the findings can be useful for your research area. There's often an overlap between discussion and conclusion. Yes, sometimes people get confused that is discussion different? Is conclusion different? Yes, they are different. Some people also use the heading discussion and conclusion. But in my opinion and experience, it should always be two separate headings. It should not be confused at one because it confuses the author or the reviewer also. So why, I will tell you later in the coming section on conclusion, that why discussion and conclusion should be different and how they are different. So in other words, discussion is basically discussion of result and conclusion is what you concluded. What is your final take on this topic? So discussion and conclusion are advised, and many journals are also following this format of having two different headings, discussion and conclusion, separately. So do not get confused between these two. When you will learn about conclusion, you will understand that they're both different, but they're both important. You cannot write a conclusion without discussing the results. So discussion is the link between your whole study and the conclusion. Without discussion, there can be no conclusion, right? And many times the writers and researchers miss discussion. They show the findings and they move on to conclusion directly. So you cannot do to move on to conclusion directly without showing the discussion of your results, right? So I hope you understood now that what is discussion. And moving on to the second topic, which is research implications. Although it is covered under the research under the discussion part, I will still discuss it briefly for you because I told you earlier that research implications are shown in the discussion part. That in discussion, you not only discuss the result, but you also show what are the implications of your study. So again, your choice, you want to show implications as part of discussion or you want to show research implications separately. But whatever the case is, whatever format you choose, whatever the requirement of journal is, implications is also very important. Now, what is research implications? You might have heard about this term, might have not. I will simplify it for you. The implications of your research will derive from why it was important to conduct your study and how it will impact the future research in your field. So, implication just tells the reader and or the reviewer why was it important, why the study was required, and how it will impact your research area. So you basically highlight the benefits or usefulness of your research. That this research is important to do because there are still, for example, still unanswered questions which needs to be answered, or this study has contributed to the review of literature because this research gap was not filled yet. So in implications, you try to show how your study contributed to the broader research in your field. You should base your implication on how previous studies have advanced your field and how your study can add to that. You can show that in this area, for example, the area can be, let's say, tourism management, that you can pick one topic and just say that there has been so many studies on this topic, but this thing was missing. So you use the available literature and you have added something new to the literature now. This is how you show the implications of your research. Okay, so research implications is of course more focused on how your study can help or improve the available literature in your area. Of course, please be very cautious when you're claiming that you're contributing to the area in certain way. Do not over step. Do not show what is actually not there. Let's say you cannot make claims which are not true. If you're claiming that I did this, my study will do this, they should of course be based on your results. There should be some proof of your claims you're making and your research implications. You cannot just say that my study is a pioneering study in this area and it will change the whole field. That will be a overstatement. So be cautious while you're claiming how your study will help the research area, and try to, because otherwise the reviewers will take it negatively. They will say that this is not true. How can you claim that? There should be some proof for your claim. You should not give overstatements for your implications. So I think you might have some idea now what is a research implication, and it again I repeat, it depends on you if you want to show research implications separately or along with discussion. We can do that both the cases. The best way is for you to know one more question which must be coming to your head, that which format should I follow for the discussion, implication, and conclusion. So the best way is to try to see what is the most popular format in your area of study, or the journals or the top journals of your area. Which format they follow? Then you can follow the same, because again it can vary as per the choice of the writer or the journal. So one way is to read the papers and see their format, the popular formats used by the journals. Now, research implications suggest how the findings can be important for policy, practice, theory, and subsequent research. As I said, you try to show that in future, how my study will guide or help in policy making, can be used in practice, can be used in theory, or other researches or future researches also. The implication of your research will derive from why it was important to conduct your study. So your focus is to show why it was important to do your study. It was not baseless. You should focus to highlight that it was important to do this, so that you also show that in future people will be able to use my study to do further research. So again, the idea is not to show immediate practical solutions. The idea is to show long-term impact in the area of your topic. You should base your implications on how previous similar studies have advanced your field and how your study can add to that. You also show that these studies were important for my own research. I used these studies for my research. They guided me till now, but I am also adding something new to that. That should be your implication, right? Then the last part of recommendation and this implications is recommendation versus implication. Now, again, one more question which might have come to your mind is you must have seen recommendation also mentioned in some dissertation or some research article. although recommendations are not used, the word is not used these days in research papers, especially in the area from where I come, tourism management. But let's just differentiate between them also. Recommendation versus implications. Implications are, as we say, already explored, state the importance of study, um, you know, which is, sorry, yeah. Implication is basically you try to show that how your findings can be relevant for the improvement of the practices, theories, let's say management theories, marketing theories, how your study can improve them or add something new to them, or how future studies can be improved or can be guided. So it is more future oriented, as I said, the implications. As stated earlier, that does not mean that you believe your findings will change something immediately. You should not believe that my research implications will be able to show the people immediate results. It is more long-term oriented, and you should not be, there shouldn't be any reason to believe that you could have an impact right now. So implications are future oriented. They're more policy oriented, theory oriented. Uh, as compared to that, recommendation, on the other hand, are specific suggestions which you give to the policymakers, which they should adopt as soon as possible. For example, that in your study, you were trying to find out what is the best way to do one thing. Is the method one, two, or three? Amongst all these three, what was the best way to do something? And you found out that method one is the best way, right? So then you recommend to maybe a company, to maybe a policymaker, that you should use a method one. It is the best as per my study. That can be your recommendation. That my recommendation is to use method one, not two and three. They are inefficient. That's a practical recommendation. But research implication is not focused on giving immediate solution. Recommendation is focused on giving solution, a practical and immediate one. Although, on the other hand, implications are focused towards giving you a glimpse of why your study was important and how it can guide other studies in future, how it can add on to the already available literature or theories. So I hope you understand now the difference between recommendation and implications, right? Before I move on to the next part of our discussion, which is conclusion, I repeat once again that in discussion, we discuss our results. The idea is to interpret our results and to make the reader understand that what were you trying to do, right? And what were the questions you asked in the beginning and what you achieved in the end. In implications, you try to show the implications of your results, that what you found out, what you studied, how it can be beneficial for the policymakers, for the your field, your study of area or your subject. Again, implication can also be a part of discussion. It can also be shown separately. And in discussion, you can also add your limitations. You have choice to add your limitations also in the discussion part. So all these is step by step. Now, what is in the end of any research paper or study? I'm sure must have heard about this term, which is very, very important. Any research paper is incomplete without it. It will be rejected. It will not be accepted. You will be told to that add this topic in this, add this heading into this. This chapter is important. If you're writing a thesis, if you're writing a research paper, article, it is incomplete without a conclusion. A conclusion is the final summary of your research paper, essay or article, whatever you're writing. It summarizes your entire work. Discussion's aim is not to summarize your entire work. Sometimes, again, in my experience, if I get a research paper to review, people at the conclusion. In conclusion only, they discuss the results and they summarize what they want to say. That is very confusing for the reviewer or the reader. Discussion should be separate and conclusion should be separate. If they are coming together, they should be divided in different paragraphs at least. Because conclusion's aim is not to discuss results, but to summarize your whole study. The conclusion paragraph should restate your study. It should summarize that, you know, what were you trying to do, right? What were your results, and what are you saying in the end? What is your conclusion? What are the concluding remarks you're making? You give supporting ideas, you discuss your work, to give final impression of your central idea. So conclusion is usually given in your own language. The author gives things and tries to give his final views about that topic. So all the claims, all the important central ideas and points are mentioned in the conclusion part. The final summation should also contain the moral of the story. Again, we can say that conclusion is a way of giving the moral of the story. Story as in what were you doing so far? You give the moral. What was the point of doing all this? A good conclusion will wrap up your final thoughts and main points, combining all pertinent information with an emotional appeal for ending statement. So you put all your emotions into that part. You might be thinking, how can I put my emotions in conclusion? But when a researcher is writing a research paper, he or she gets attached to it. They have put efforts into it, doing everything so far. So put your heart into your conclusion. Show that you have done all these things. Show what you found out. Show that what is your final statement. And that can leave a good impact on the reader. It's a study on tourism impacts, be it a study on pollution or sustainable development, any area which is burning topic. It should leave the reader with an impact. Conclusion is that part which can which can have a long lasting impact on the reader. So good conclusion wraps your final thoughts, gives the main points, and one more way to do this is also that you keep your whole study so far hard copy with you, and then you try to summarize it in the conclusion. Look at your introduction, that what were you trying to do? What were you saying in the very beginning? Look at your findings, what you found out. Look at your discussion, what you mean by the results, and summarize all that in the conclusion part. Ending statement should resonate with the reader. When you end the conclusion, it should be something which should be in the head of the reader for a long time. You can sometimes one way to do is that you end the conclusion with a question mark. You leave the reader with a question mark, which to think about something in future. So, as per one of the surveys done by a community, early researchers community, the survey which was done on young researchers, it showed that one of the most difficult part of writing a research paper or article, the researchers find the conclusion part to be the most difficult. Uh, be it abstract methodology and title, that is, thinking about title is also a very big task, I must say. But people get hard time to think what they should mention in the conclusion, because again, as I said, you have to end the whole story. So how will you do that? So conclusion is somewhere people get stuck at very easily, and surveys also show that it is a difficult task for the researchers. So I will try to make it easy for you by showing you in one or two more slides that how you can plan your conclusion. Before that, what is the purpose of conclusion? Why we need to give conclusion? The purpose of conclusion paragraph is to wrap up your writing, is to reinforce the main idea that you presented in body of the paper. You take the body of the paper and you make it into an idea. The idea which is your own. You're giving your own idea in conclusion. Conclusion structure is one of the key elements of the academic writing. The structure of the conclusion should be very well thought. You have to plan it also. As I said, I will tell you about the structure in some time. So plan your structure of conclusion as well. How will you start? How will you end the conclusion as well? Every heading in your research article should be well thought. How will you start discussion? Hi, is my slide visible? I think again there was a network issue.
Yeah, but okay, you are back, so we're good.
Okay, thank you. So I was saying that you have to present you have to make sure that you are writing and focusing on your initial statement also in the conclusion part, and you can use introduction as a reference in your hand. You can keep a hard copy of introduction with you and use it to write your conclusion. Your conclusion should reinforce and address the points you made in your introduction. So if you said something in the introduction that this is very important to do, this area is untouched, whatever you said, link it with the conclusion. Try to say that what you were trying to do, you were right in your way. A conclusion paragraph should feature the key statements for your intro and supporting points and have some emotional appeal to it. So, as I was saying earlier, also that it is important to put some emotions into it. So, uh, however, your conclusion should only feature key evidence and such introduction introduced with the body paragraph of your work. Avoid using your conclusion to introduce new information, future research, or new ideas. So, in conclusion, our focus is should not be on giving a new idea. You are giving your conclusion, right? So you should avoid using giving new ideas or introduce new information in conclusion. But yes, if it's important, you can show what can be done in future, what you want the other researchers to do in future. That can be done in the towards the end of the conclusion. Up to you, right? So a good conclusion will also use emotional or sensory language to create a powerful, lasting image or impact on the reader's mind. Using an emotional appeal, you can appeal to the reader also, and you can, as I was saying earlier, also that you can leave them with a question mark, something to think about in future. So this is about the purpose of the conclusion. Now, how to write a conclusion? A conclusion should always start with a topic sentence. The first sentence of a conclusion is an effective way to remind the reader of the main argument. Start your conclusion with a argument you were making in the beginning, right? So in the introduction, you're usually making an argument. You are introducing your topic, why it is important, what needs to be done. Use it in your conclusion. You can maybe start your conclusion with that it is very important to understand a certain thing. Start like that. So mention your introductory argument in conclusion. Start with that. Then use your introductory paragraph as a guide. When you're writing your conclusion, keep a copy of your introduction hands-on with you and use it to showcase what were you saying in the beginning, and you try to connect the introduction with the conclusion part. So you can use it as a reference because you have to link the beginning with the end. It is very important. Sometimes an author is saying something else in the beginning, in the end, the story is something else. The research questions are something else, but the answers are not there in the conclusion. So keep it with you to make sure that you are able to link introduction with the conclusion. So it can be used as a reference to avoid rewriting something, to avoid writing something which you were not saying in the beginning at all, to avoid making claims which are not true, right? Third thing can be summarize the main ideas. So effective conclusion will restate the most relevant information to sum up in main points. So you can write main points of your study. Points which are very, very important for the reader or the reviewer to know. Academic essays or research papers can be lengthy. So a brief summary is good. So as I was saying that you want to, if a reader wants to understand your study, he can go to discussion and conclusion directly, right? So make it brief, make it short, write in points, main points. However, your conclusion should only feature key evidence and research introduced within the body paragraph of your work. Avoid using conclusion to introduce new information, as I said earlier. And it should appeal to the reader's emotions. I've already told you this, I will skip that. Last point, include a closing sentence. There should always be a closing sentence in the conclusion. If you're starting it from the introductory statement, end it with a closing sentence. Your closing sentence should wrap up your entire work, the synthesis of your whole work. Write your final clear views in the closing sentence. Leave the reader with strong impression that what you are doing, what you did, what you are saying is important. So ending, of course, the body is important, but the starting and the ending is very important. And remember that the way you end your research paper, the last few lines of conclusion are going to have a lasting impact on the reviewer or the reader. So make your point very clear. Every research has some point you are trying to make. So make that point clear in the conclusion part. That's very important. So now, after understanding the discussion, implications, the conclusion, I have some do's and don'ts for you, which whenever you're writing a research paper, they are mostly linked with the discussion conclusion part, but something to remember when you are writing a research paper, when you are finalizing it before sending it ahead. Always read the guidelines given by the journal. Every journal has some guidelines. They vary and they're not the same. So you cannot send the same format to everywhere. So always read the guidelines of the journals in advance. Begin with a clear statement of principal findings. When you're writing a discussion, be clear what are your findings. This is focus on discussion. This will make the reader understand what is the finding of your result. Explain why your outcomes, why your study is important. Highlight your strength and limitations. So these are focus on discussion. All these things are focus on discussion and conclusion. State why your study, whether the result of your study disapprove your hypothesis or they don't. I told you in the beginning, in the discussion, you can also mention that this was your hypothesis if your results are supporting it or not, right? Introduce new or expand ways to think about research questions. So you can also, discuss your research questions in discussion. You can mention that there are new way to think about this thing. There are some new ideas which you can put forward in discussion. If dealing with contemporary or ongoing problems such as climate change, discuss possible consequences if problem is avoided. So you can also mention in discussion part that if you do not do this study, if you do not go in this area, it can have a long lasting impact on the environment or the world. So you can also show that in the discussion part. Be concise. Avoid adding unnecessary information, be it discussion, be it conclusion. Avoid adding unwanted things there. Be to the point, but do not miss important things as well. Try to be concise. And if you talk about the don'ts, statement with we investigated, statements with we studied should be avoided. We can rather use this study says or this study puts forward this idea. So avoid using we in this part of the study. Include new arguments or evidence not previously discussed. Necessary information and evidence should be introduced in the main body of the paper. So you should also not to introduce new ideas in the ending of the study, right? Avoid that unless it's very, very important, because that will deviate the focus of the reader or the reviewer from the main argument, right? Sometimes, we're putting so many ideas into this last part of the study that I think about this also, this should be done, this should not be done. So focus, avoid that, avoid deviating from the main argument. Apologize even if your research contains significant limitations. Don't undermine your authority by including statements that doubt your methodology. Do not apologize for your study. Even if you say that you could not do something, if there were some limitation, you do not have to apologize for that. You do not have to use word that you feel sorry about something or you regret something. Do not use such words in the ending of the study, because every study has some limitations. You might not have the right time, right equipments, right guidance or funds or money to do a research. It is okay to mention your limitations openly, but do not overdo it, because then that will make the reviewer doubt your study. Are you yourself in doubt about your study? So be it very subtle when you're mentioning your limitations. Don't shy away from speaking on limitations or negative results. Even if the results are not supportive, they are not in your favor, do not shy away from showing it. It's okay if your hypothesis is not supported. Sometimes what we do is that we try to do something, or play with the results and try to prove that we were right. But it is okay to say that you were not, because otherwise it will not be called research. You have to try and see the results and then you try again. Including limitations and negative results will give reader a complete understanding of the presented research. Reader will understand that yes, that what the author was trying to say in the beginning, it turned out not to be true, and it is okay. That will make the reader understand the complete story. Potential limitations can help other researchers in future to try to avoid them. It can guide other researchers also, right? So potential limitations include sources of potential bias, threat to internal and external validity, barriers to implementing an intervention, and other issues inherent to study. So limitations include sources of potential bias, threat to internal and external validity, barriers to implementing an intervention, and other issues inherent to study. So my contact information. If any queries or any questions are there, I can take them. You can contact me through my email ID as well if you have questions about today's presentation. Thank you once again, and I sincerely apologize for this network issue. It's raining here, so the monsoon is here. That's why the network issues have been happening. This has been a very good experience and it's an honor to speak on this topic amongst all the dignitaries. Thank you once again.